Hello everyone, Jared here, and in today's video I'm taking the high-speed rail from Kenya's capital of Nairobi to Mombasa on the eastern coast. For those of you who do not know this, China actually helped build the high-speed rail in Kenya. So I was going to find out what the similarities and differences are between the two countries' high-speed rails. Pretty much the only way to arrive here is by car, and once you leave the parking lot, you go immediately into the first security check, where they separate you from your bags, and then they have dogs come and sniff your luggage just to check and see if there's any drugs. And once you're through the security check, you're out in front of the main terminus building. But before you can pass through the next security check, you have to make sure that you have your ticket. So, if you happen to buy your ticket a little bit ahead of time, there's a room off to the side where there are these small machines that you can print your prepaid tickets from, like what I did here. So here I am at the Nairobi terminus for the train station to Mombasa. Let's see what this ride's like. But before I could actually get onto the train, I had to wait inside at the terminal upstairs. This place was a lot smaller than most of the terminals I was used to being at in China. But because this was only one big room, it was much easier to navigate to our gate, considering, again, there's only one place you had to go to, and there was only one train time that you had to pay attention to as well. Now, just like in China, they had a few cafes up inside of this resting area, but I couldn't really record anything because, just like the rest of Kenya, they really don't like when you take footage of anything inside of buildings. So this was the only snippet that I had. Out of the lounge, and finally heading to the train. Making my way down the hallway and then down an escalator was when the differences between Kenya and China's high-speed rails was really highlighted. First of all, the train was already here waiting for us, and many of the times in China, we'd have to wait for the train to arrive, and we'd just have a 5-minute wait before the train would go ahead and move off to the next destination. And because we were waiting inside the terminal, we didn't have any numbered station for the cars that we'd be loading onto to wait at ahead of time. This was a little disappointing because one of the highlights of the high-speed rail, particularly in China, was being able to just be a few feet away from it as it arrived and getting shots like this. Anyways, upon boarding the train, I could see that a lot of the interior was very much the same, and the influence from China was pretty much spot on, with the interior of the cars being practically identical, down to the colors of the seats. So there is quite a bit of leg space actually. So I'm glad I chose first class. I was able to stretch out my legs completely, and if I wanted to use the footstool, I could have brought that down as well. But a quick note about the power outlets, these may not be what you are familiar with, so make sure you have the appropriate adapter for using them on these trains for your electrical devices. As you can see behind me, people are placing their luggage up on the racks on top on the sides, and this is where most people will end up putting all of their luggage. However, if you have bags that are too big like mine are, then you're going to end up putting them either in the front or back of the cars behind the seats. Now, one small difference, aside from of course having English as the language spoken inside of the vehicle in announcements, was that the chairs all had these headrests with Magical Kenya written on them. This, I believe, is the government's tourist website, which you can look up in your own time. After about 10 minutes of letting everyone get onto the train to board, it was finally time for the high-speed rail to get into gear and start moving. And now it was time to see what Kenya's landscape looked like as I went across the country. Unfortunately though, most of the area outside of the high-speed rail's tracks looked like it was pretty much the same almost the entire way to Mombasa. So after a little bit, I went over to the meal car, where, unfortunately yet again, I was not allowed to film. So I took a couple shots just to give you an idea of what that looked like. I actually got myself a couple of beef samosas before heading back to my seat. If I had to compare the view outside of the window of a high-speed rail in Kenya to China, of course, it's going to naturally be more interesting for the high-speed rails in China because there's a lot more variation in what you can see. Kenya's landscape for the most part was tall grasses, bushes, and dirt, with the occasional small town that we would pass by on the way. Sometimes there would be some small hills or mountains that we would see in the distance, but again, they're really incomparable to what you would find on the high-speed rail in China. In China, I would see high-rises as far as the eye could see. You'd be able to see these buildings under construction pretty much everywhere, even in the most remote of areas. The few farms that we passed by in Kenya definitely stood out in the landscape due to their green coloring, when everything else around there was brown or red. But in China, it was pretty much always dense and green, and rice fields were aplenty. In China, we'd also pass by rivers or even cross over them. But in Kenya, again, it was pretty much all just the same type of landscape the entire way. Supposedly, you can see a lot of wild animals from the high-speed rail as you pass between Nairobi and Mombasa. But unfortunately, the only animals I ever saw were just these 2 elephants that you see in this clip that I slowed down by 300%. So I really didn't have any luck seeing animals on this ride. But if you choose to go on it, perhaps you will. So overall, my impressions of the high-speed rail in Kenya are that, although the landscape isn't exactly the best view, to get a ticket for just about $30 to go all the way from the capital to the coast is really a good deal. And it'll take a lot less time to get there than it would be if you went driving by car. So for time convenience alone, it's definitely worth taking. Eventually, the train pulled up at the station, and I had to go up the escalator, follow the people out of the station, and I immediately noticed a change in the weather. Well, I can definitely tell that I'm by the beach now. Feel that humidity in the air. It actually started raining, so I was quite lucky that I was able to find a taxi pretty quickly to take me to where I was heading for the night. However, that's going to be it for my quick review of what the high-speed rail experience is like in Kenya, and comparing it to my experiences on high-speed rail in China. Come back for the next video when I go to the beaches around Mombasa, as I enjoy the weather, the scenic environment, learn a bit about the area from a local guide, and generally just enjoy my time at the beach. Until next time. Thank you again for watching this video. If you liked it, please click the subscribe button down below and give the video a thumbs up. Also, please share this video as well as others from my channel to help this channel grow.